as Jews, we're not safe anywhere. In Israel, in North America, Paris, in between not feeling safe because of rockets and Hamas. In Israel, not feeling safe because of students' protest. In North America, not feeling safe because of political far left. Today in France, there's always a choice to be made.
Welcome to What Came After. I'm your host, Manya Marcus. On What Came After, we'll take a look at the many ways that people's lives changed on and after the brutal massacre in Israel on October 7th, 2023. We'll be speaking with people in Israel and around the world about how the devastating attack by Hamas has shifted, shaped, and changed them. To learn more about our podcast, please visit us at whatcameafter.com. Rabbi Ackermann, thank you for having me. So it is January 28th, 2025, and I am sitting here in Paris with you.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm very thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So if you could introduce yourself for our listeners, let us know who you are, where you're from, and what brought you to Paris.
My name is Emile Ackermann. I'm a rabbi. I was born in Strasbourg in France near Germany. I've lived there until I was 17. Then I got to Yeshivat Chovevei Torah for a year. And then I came to Paris at first to study international law. But when I met Myriam, my wife, we both decided to become rabbis together. And so we decided to build a community. It's called Ayeka. And you are here in the building that we moved into a little bit less than a year ago to build community. We've been having regular minyanim since 2022. It's a new step for us that we are beginning now.
So this building is not just a shul. There's a lot that's going on here, as I've learned as we've tried to find a space for this conversation. Can you tell us everything that is happening in this building in addition to the shul?
This building is called the Écuge. It's near Gare du Nord in the north of Paris. And at first, the community center was built to welcome Sephardim immigrants that came during the 60s, 70s. To enable them to rebuild the Jewish life, to create a network. It wasn't always in this building, but it was always in this area. And now it has evolved in a big community center where you can find ulpan. There is a theater show going on that's being prepared right now. Shows for kids. There are 3 minyanim on Shabbat. One Sephardi, one Tunisian, and one that's ours, the Modern Orthodox one. Yeah, a lot of things are happening regularly here. Poetics are coming to give conferences. We have artists. We have a lot of concerts, jazz concerts especially. It's a lively community.
So we're at this place in the post-October 7th world where a lot of people in my community in North America have indicated to me that I should be more scared to be in Paris than I have been to be in Israel. I'm wondering if you want to just jump in and comment on people's fears and what kinds of changes you've seen in your community since the start of the war.
So first of all, I think even pre-October 7, every time you mention Paris, like in America or in Israel, like people are always like, oh, are you not afraid? A lot of antisemitism there. I think that's not true in terms of there's not only antisemitism here in Paris. I've been wearing my kippah in the streets for years now. I've been to the so-called bad neighborhoods in the north of Paris, northeast. I've been basically everywhere with my kippah. And not only have I never encountered anti-Semitism in its aggressive form, I only had good encounters with people on the street, people who come in. I've had like weird encounters where people ask me to bless them on the street. But that's kind of it. Usually people are very welcoming. People are very okay with the kippah and the fact that you're Jewish. I know that there is anti-Semitism and there have been multiple incidents in the last years of anti-Semitism in Paris, but that's not the only story. I think you have to hear both sides. And I think the people who are already in Israel, especially the French immigrants, they are also kind of pushing this narrative that they came here because of anti-Semitism, which is sometimes true, obviously, right? But nothing is black and white. And a lot of people in my community have also good encounters, good experiences. We just had a meeting last week with Muslims from the far left like pro-Palestinians, Muslim from the far left right here, to try to build a group where we can discuss the issues on Israel-Palestine. Some very good things are happening. Like for nothing in the world, I would move elsewhere.
That's a really fascinating comment, especially to those of us in the North American diaspora. But before I go there, I want to ask, tell us how old you are.
I'm 28.
Okay, so you're, I mean, by my standards, you're young. Where were you in your life when things like the Charlie Hebdo shootings happened or the supermarket shooting? And certainly you've been in your position now since there were some very disturbing sexual assaults in parts of France on young Jewish women. In terms of the ages that you were and the stages that you were in your Jewish life, do you feel that these events that we think of so much in the rest of the diaspora have been influential for you in some way?
Yes, those issues have been very influential in good and bad. Meaning that Charlie Hebdo was maybe the last time that we had millions of people showing up, not only for the writers that were killed, but also for Jews. And I think that was the last time that we had this unity in France. We had like millions of people in the street. I remember a lot of my friends crying. And now it's not the case. We feel that we are more split, between political issues, between different views on not only the conflicts, but even on secularism, religion. Today, that's the big debate in France. I think one of the big debates. Where do you see your place as a religious Jew, as a religious people in society? Also, how to integrate Islam and Muslims like in the Republic, meaning from the far left saying that there's no problem, from the far right saying that's all the problem that there is. And you have to find your way to try to be nuanced in those issues. And I think that's very hard. So Charlie Hebdo was maybe not only for me, but for a lot of people in France, a point where you could not ignore the issues that were going on in France.
So let me pause you just for a second. Charlie Hebdo, for people who don't know, can you explain what it is and what happened?
Yeah, it's a satirical journal, newspaper, that used to draw a lot of caricatures of everything, like Muslim, Jews, Catholics. People don't know that, but actually there have been more caricatures of Catholics in the journal than Muslim caricatures. But because there was in Norwegian, I think, illustrator that was receiving a lot of threats because he drew Muhammad, then Charlie Hebdo decided to draw also a lot of caricatures of Muhammad, and then they received threats. In 2012, they received a Molotov cocktail in their building, and in 2015, terrorists showed up and tried to kill everybody.
And they were successful in many cases.
Yeah, wiping out a lot of the drawers, illustrators, and writers there. Also, at the same time, the other terrorists showed up to a kosher supermarket and killed the Jews because there were Jews there. There were other incidents also, so they killed a lot of people, and there was a point in French history that you cannot ignore anymore. That I think made everyone go crazy in terms of political issues. I think that polarized the debates even more.
So it's very hard for me to understand the French dynamics. I got here yesterday. I listened to a podcast. This is not my area of expertise. But it does seem to me that the post-Charlie Hebdo shootings really united people around this value of secularism, that we should all be able to equally mock religious traditions, and for that to be met with violence is particularly offensive to the French sensibility. You're in a slightly different groove. I mean, it seems like you value the secularism in France that has the potential to foster multi-communal harmony. But you're also a religious person who wears your kippah in public. How do you marry your appreciation for French secularism with your identity and visibility as a Jew?
That's a very good question for people who want to understand the French dynamic. So thank you. We translate laïcité as secularism, but there's actually no term in English to really catch the meaning of laïcité, which is separation between churches and state.
Can you say that more slowly for those of us who don't? Laïcité?
Laïcité.
Laïcité.
Laïcité
Okay.
is usually translated as secularism, but doesn't mean that there's no room for religion in the public sphere. Laïcité in the beginning was created because we wanted to French Republicans wanted to fight the influence of the church in the beginning of the 20th century. They wanted to fight it because the church wanted to be influential, especially in the education of the young people, of the schools. And they decided that, we should separate completely church and state. The state should be secular in terms of how we would educate the people. And the church can still have their churches and they can exist, but they have to be integrated into a more legal area. So they had to create religious associations in order to be part legally of the state, to exist in France. And so there was a big fight in the beginning. Even the Pope at the time was against. But now it's really part of the French culture that religion should not have an influence on politics and everything. But it does not mean religion should not exist in the public sphere. And that's one of the debate today because of Islam. It's a debate that started in 1989. There were two young religious Muslim girls that refused to remove their veil in the school. And after that, in 2004, there was a law that was passed that prohibited religious garments in schools. There's a debate today on what we should do about Islam in France. And there are basically two teams. One team is saying that we should use laïcité as a means to go on the offensive and try to fight the influence of Islam that is supposed to want to conquer the public sphere. The other theme is that laïcité, as it is now, is a legal term. It's something that enables us to live together. It should not be changed, and we should use the legal weapons that we have just to make sure that the law is applied everywhere. But we should not change the laïcité. And usually, the first team is more on the right wing. We should actually go on the offensive and fight Islam with laïcité. And the other team is if laïcité is good, we don't need to change it. We just need to make sure that the law is applied everywhere it is. And as you've maybe guessed it, I'm more on the second team.
It seems to me, though, that as you're identifying two teams, that you also kind of reject the idea that things have to be a binary. You're either in this camp or another camp. We can't carve out a third or a fourth or a fifth space. Do you think of yourself as strictly in one camp or the other? Or do you feel that you have more nuance than that in your views?
I think everything is on a spectrum, right? No one is strictly in one camp or another. I'm completely, pro Charlie Hebdo. I think that everyone should have the right to mock religions and religious beliefs. I'm completely against, putting back offense of blasphemy in the law. At the same time, I think that today people want to go on the offensive or choosing the wrong path for what we should do with laïcité. They're looking at religion and everything that you do religiously as a way to become more extreme. They think that there is a direct connection between Islam and terrorism, and every Muslim that becomes a little bit more religious, like a frum Muslim, is a threat. That's where I'm on the left side and the right side, because I don't think that there's a continuum between the two.
I see. So let me bring this conversation to a slightly more personal dimension. You told me earlier that you have two children. They're young. I'm wondering if your sense of France or Paris post-October 7th, and now with small children, has shifted in terms of your feelings of day-to-day safety. Having kids shifts that for everyone, but I'm wondering how that works for you.
I mean, obviously, I'm always, scared that something would happen to my wife or my children. But I think that as Jews, and that's maybe my religious hat now that speaks, but as Jews, we're not safe anywhere, meaning that we have a religion that makes us, part of society, part of the people of the country that we're in. And at the same time, we always have this critical view, step back of society today and its values. And I think that makes us unsafe in Israel, in North America, Paris, in between not feeling safe because of rockets and Hamas in Israel, not feeling safe because of students' protest in North America, not feeling safe because of political far left today in France. There's always a choice to be made, but I feel French. I think you have to choose the bad traits that you are okay to live with, right?
The bad choice that makes most sense for you.
Exactly. So we're not safe anywhere, but I'd rather feel unsafe in France than anywhere else.
That's really fascinating. And it sounds like it's part of your theology, actually, that we need to
Yes.
be apart and that our vulnerability sets us up for something holy, maybe. I mean, I think a lot about Jewish practice and separation. You know, you've got laws of family purity, you separate challah, you sort of hide the challah from the other happenings of a Shabbat meal before you unveil it. So separation does seem to be part of our...
It's something that we repeat, every week. Mavdil ben kodesh lechol, you separated between what's sacred and something that's not. Mavdil ben Israel amim, you separated between the people of Israel and the other people. That's part of our theology. But that doesn't mean to me that we're not supposed to be part of, society that we're in as like modern Orthodox and descendant of people who believed in Torah Medereretz, Torah with implication in society. I think we're supposed to be part of the society that we're in because that's also our responsibility as Jews to bring something to the table. If, the Torah is supposed to be the word of God and it doesn't have anything to say on today's society because we have to live as if we never left the ghetto, then the word of God is not eternal. It just speaks to a very particular set of people at a certain date. The Torah has to speak to everyone, every time, anytime. That's part of our mission, but also that makes us, as I said, a step back, always having a critical view of what's happening. We always have to cherish the tension between our values and modern values and what can come in, what can go out, from what we should protect ourselves and what we could take from modern values today.
Sometimes a person says something over the course of the interview, and I know that that's going to be the title of the episode. I think Cherish the Tension really speaks to the position a lot of us are in, actually, right now. But again, you do have this lovely wife and these children. It sounds like you have a little bit more of an instinct for fear on their behalf than you do on your own.
Yes, that's right. I always fear that something is going to happen to my wife and my children. They cross the street. I wonder if a car is going to come. Maybe that's my Ashkenazi side, But I think as Jews, like I said, we're not safe anywhere, so might as well choose my French patriotism. We shouldn't be naive and forget about the history. I know that there are French policemen that put, a lot of Jews in the trains to go to Auschwitz 85 years ago. So I don't want to be naive. And at the same time, I think that we should be like 99% patriots. Like there's always going to be the 1% step back. Like maybe one day I'll still have to move because that's the story of Judaism, of the Jews everywhere. So I know that it's possible that I have to one day choose another place to live. And at the same time, doesn't mean that I can't try to make my home in France.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a tension, like I said.
Do you have multiple passports?
No, just the French one.
Just the one. To me, it sounds like you feel that your role here is legacy work, preservation of a tradition that's in jeopardy a little bit. Can you talk about what that means to you? And I'm going to ask you to weave in one more thing, which is whether or not you felt it's been more challenging to do this work after October 7th.
So my grandparents were the heads of the movement that was called Yeshurun that existed in Strasbourg and in all France before the war, and they became the leaders in the 70s. Their goal was to create a space for Jews that are Orthodox in practice, but open-minded, and we want to live in society. An example that I always give is that they had summer camps, and the summer camps were co-ed, men and women, but you had 1 hour of Torah learning every day. Today, if you want your children to go to summer camp where they're going to learn Torah an hour a day, it's not going to be co-ed.
It has to be separate.
And if you want a co-ed summer camp, you're not going to learn Torah there. So to me, that encapsulates a little bit what my grandparents were about. We're trying to be true to what we think was the spirit of their work. And after October 7, we've actually had more people coming in synagogue, like people, their friends were talking about their Jewishness. And they were like, oh, I'm Jewish and I don't know anything about Judaism. So we've had a lot of people right after October 7, like a few months after, who came in once or twice, just wanted to learn more about Judaism, and then they didn't come back. But I think I felt some kind of a movement.
It's interesting because for people who are far from their Judaism, the fact that this is an Orthodox space might make them feel like they're coming into something insular and that they're looking for the safety of some insularity. As a matter of fact, you guys are deliberately not very insular. You know, whenever there's a crisis, people circle the wagons, they become more insular, and I think that can be a healthy response. But then they arrive at you and you guys are doing Muslim-Jewish dialoguing. I mean, I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
I think that's our goal, to get a safe space for Jews. Like we've had, limud, we've had evenings where everyone comes and sing. We had obviously the minyanim during Shabbat. So we had a lot of people coming in at this point to just feel safe between Jews and then go out there and be proud of their Jewishness and bring to the table positively what their Judaism is about.
You strike me as a eternal optimist.
Yes, I get that a lot.
and I think
said 99%.
Yeah, no, and I think that's beautiful. But I think probably you're aware from your congregants and constituents that it's getting harder for people, whether it's a reflection of reality outside or the psychological fear, to bring our Judaism into non-Jewish spaces. Is that something that people tell you?
Yes. A lot of people actually tell me the opposite of what I just said. They don't want people to know that they're Jewish. They want to hide everything about their Jewishness unless the people are part of their very close circle. I understand them. I would not judge them at all because obviously 85 years ago, that's what said a lot of people. I think the debate is, when is too late and when is it not worth the fight? I think it's not for everyone to fight. My eternal optimism is not for everyone. I would not judge people who want to just hide their Jewishness. But I think people who are able to have a responsibility to fight and to be, the Jew in the city, the kind of ambassador. It's good to have also those kind of Jews.
I have heard a lot of stories about people who take down their mezuzahs. To me, that feels really sad.
Yeah, a lot of congregants did.
A lot of congregants
And also I have a friend whose neighbors came to her and they said, can you take down your mezuzah because we don't want to take any risks for the building.
Right.
Which is like crazy.
Well, you're laughing, but it actually makes sense to me. They're not saying to her, take it down because we're offended. They're saying, take it down for the safety of everyone around us.
I just find it interesting that the response in 2015 after Charlie Hebdo was that people had a kippah on the head, even if they were not Jewish, as a show of solidarity.
That's fascinating.
It happened also in Berlin. But now people are saying, take down your mezuzah. Like,
to me, it feels like choosing a common enemy is different than choosing a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we can align that we have a common enemy in anybody who would murder illustrators for having provocative views. That feels like a very French reaction, and acting out, getting controversial in the reaction also makes sense. This is different.
I think the feeling of a lot of Jews today in France is that anti-Semitism became their problem and not like society's problem, not a French problem, but it's just like, we're sick of the Jews always whining about their problems and the fact that people don't like them. Maybe they should take it down a notch. I think that's the feeling of a lot of Jews. And that is maybe a point of contention between the far left and the rest of society today, where more and more people are talking about the fact that they are called anti-Semites when they think that they're just criticizing Israel, and that anti-Semitism is always just to silence the far left and its critics about Israel. That's a big, big part of today's debate in France.
So the last thing I want to say about visibility and hiddenness is that you and your wife are both Orthodox rabbis. This is a whole separate episode that we could do at some point, but this is a real thing. These are real rabbinical schools that give smicha in a very serious and Orthodox way. However, what I noted when I was doing some research on you and looking at your photos is that in these photos that are available publicly, you guys could be Haredi. You're wearing a black hat. It appears that she's covering her hair. We have a lot of rabbis in our community who went to your rabbinical school, and that isn't the general look. The look is more kind of common man, we're of the people. But you guys have an aesthetic, I think, that differentiates you from the secular world. Is that deliberate?
I think it is. I think understand the codes of today's Jewish community in France. It makes us look more serious. And also, we want to show our community that being more Orthodox is not about being less rigorous in the commandments. We are practicing Jews. We are rigorous in the observance of the mitzvot, of the commandments. Also happens that we think that there is something to do with like today's society and that we should like not be completely closed to anything that comes from the outside. I think today's Jewish community wants us to be like this, also to reassure them that we're rigorous in the practice of the mitzvot.
Okay, so on this level and a couple other levels, wearing your kippah, etc., you do use the public signaling of apparel to define your difference, actually. Well, your sameness in terms of the rigor of Orthodox observance and study, but your difference out in the regular French world.
Exactly.
So October 7th, it was Shabbat. In the diaspora, we do 2 days of Simchat Torah. When did you find out and what was your reaction?
So at first, during the service, people came in and said, something's happening in Israel. And at first I was like, okay, something's always happening in Israel. Manishtana.
Right.
What changed today? So I didn't fully grasp the immensity of it. At night, when it was not Chag anymore, when I could take my phone, then I understood what happened. I think the first thing I did, which is weird for some people, is that I actually went on the Telegram channels to watch everything, like every footage. I wanted to watch it not as like a morbid curiosity, but I wanted to understand what people were talking about. My wife didn't, but I watched all the footage. And then I went on Twitter and I looked at politicians that are a friend of mine on the left, and I look at their tweets, like, praying that they said something that's actually condemnation of Hamas and no buts. I was surprised by the fact that a lot of people, especially on the Green Party, actually had good reactions. The far left of today, I don't have any hope for them, but on the Green Party and on the Socialist Party were actually good reactions to that.
But how were you feeling? I mean, like, you saw the worst of it. It's interesting. It seems like you have this sort of intellectualizing, this sort of tendency to try to like take what can be deeply felt and try to metabolize it by, well, what's going on? And
it's how I process things, I think. To me, war and death just brings more war and death. So I was surprised by like the immensity of it and like 1,000 terrorists and everything and hostages. Of course, I was surprised, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised that something this bad would happen to Israel.
I think for me and for a lot of people, when we heard what had happened, there wasn't this like, okay, well, what's the bird's eye view on this conflict? It was like, humans don't do this to each other. Not even in the prosecution of war. We kill each other with bombs and guns. That's like not such an intimate act of violence. And I don't know if this is part of your optimism.
Maybe it's a way of immediately trying to internalize things by processing them more intellectually, conceptually. Maybe it's a way of protecting myself. I don't know. My first thought was, of course, it was going to happen.
Was it difficult for you to kind of have this, again, bird's eye view on what was going on and feel like, look, war begets war, begets war, begets war. But then to see this sort of like uptick in, I would say, actual anti-Semitism, not just critiques of the Israeli government. How did you deal with that?
I think that made me mad because that was closer to home. You know what I mean? To see people that I've been, following from a long time, just going full like pro Hamas, to me, that was crazy. And I reposted something on Twitter a few months ago that said, nothing radicalized me more than watching a massacre of Jews bring more antisemitism. Like for any other community, you would have solidarity and people, showing up and saying, we support Israel, we support people who suffered this massacre. But in universities everywhere in the world, in like the more of the left, realm, like a lot of politicians, journalists, a lot of people went like, yeah, it's more complicated actually, Hamas is a point. And to me, that was crazy. I actually went like on October, 10 on a far left TV to debate with the pro-Palestinian Jewish organization. which said on the morning of October 7, long live the resistance. To me, that was crazy. So I wanted to do my part as like a public figure, just to go there in the arena and just kind of like fight them. Because I was like, we're supposed to be together. We're supposed to have some kind of rational thought about this and just say like, long live the resistance. It's only going to justify more massacres. To me, that made me crazy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's something philosophical, political, theological, emotional that helps us understand why not Israel as a country, which I understand that you have some issues with its policies, and we could talk about that also, but that's an entity, okay? That's a country. Why it is that Israelis themselves can't get the kind of sympathy that other groups tend to receive in the wake of a situation like this?
First of all, I think it's new, right? That up until 1967, Israelis were the good guys and they got a lot of sympathy from France, from America. I think the first change was 1967 when they actually began occupying another place. And that shifted for a lot of people the views, like, oh, they're doing something bad. And for my generation, who's only known Israel as like a big power and not this little David, but like actually the Goliath.
Yeah.
That's something to take into account. And that's why there's today a big gap between, the old generation and new generation. That's, I wouldn't say like anti-Zionist, but even in the Jewish community, there are more people like a bit more critical of Israel that you can find in old generations, because we never knew the Israel to receive the existential threat. Because of October 7, Israelis and Jews from all over the world felt this existential threat, but the world cannot understand that. Because to them, Israel is the big power. Israel is the one doing bad things. And there's this idea that Israel has done this like original sin, whether they're like right historically or not, because everything is more complicated. But in their view, like Israel has committed an original sin of occupying another land, so they shouldn't get the sympathy. And also there's this decolonial movement that gave a prism through which people are looking at the conflict, which is to me a very bad prism because it doesn't show the whole story of how Israel was built. People want a more polarized view. They need a bad guy and a good guy. They don't want to go into the nuance. They want this idea that they're fighting for good against evil. And I have a good friend who's in the world of academia, and he said, the left, the last 10 years, fought a lot in the name of its values, but for small things. And then after October 7, they can finally fight the real fight, the post-colonial fight that it can be politicized and talk about. And I think that that's something to have in mind. To them, it's the last fight, the good versus evil fight. And that's why Israel cannot catch a break.
It's very strange to me because I think one of the things that I've learned as we are kind of at this place in the war, the Assad regime has fallen. We found crematoria. We understand chemical weapons were used. I'm very confused why the world has a harder time focusing on some larger, more murderous regimes, governments, happenings. Do you have an opinion on that? Again, from a theological or political standpoint?
From a historical standpoint, I would say, of course, there is antisemitism. The whole Western world was built also on antisemitism. And the same way that we learn to dismantle our beliefs in racism and sexism, we need to do the same thing for antisemitism. And the world has not done that yet. So, of course, there is antisemitism. I think there is racism in the sense that people don't care when Arabs kill each other, but they care when the Jews are actually aiming the gun. That's part of it. I think there is the prism of like post-colonial thought that Jews are now looked at as white people coming from Europe who are killing like non-white people.
Which is fascinating when you're actually in Israel and there's a lot of non-white
and like
Jews.
For decades, like Jews were actually the non-white that you should kill. So we're always the entity to fight. Like when we want to fight the whites, then Jews are white, but when we had to fight the non-white, Jews were the non-white. So that's like anti-Semitism that's deep in the Western values. And at the end of the day, Israel is big political power and is also doing bad things. There's a fine line between whataboutism, which is like a logical fallacy of like, oh, but you're not talking about this, and actually trying to understand, is there a bias against Israel that Israel is not judged by the same standard?
And that's where some of the anti-Semitism comes in.
Exactly.
The standard.
It's a fine line. It's not always very clear. How can you fight against some of the action that the Israeli government is doing that you deem bad, and at the same time trying to be balanced in your criticism? And I've actually done the work. I've actually done a lot of conferences where I try to teach people the difference between legitimate criticism, what's biased, what's anti-Zionism, and what's anti-Semitism. And I think a lot of people, Jews and non-Jews, do not understand the difference between the four categories. And that's why we need also to educate people. I've actually, even in the Jewish Muslim group that I've talked about in the beginning, in the WhatsApp group, there is one of the Muslim guy who shared an article which held like deep anti-Semitic views. And I called it out. I said, that's not okay. But it just shows that even the people that want to work with Jews and want to work to understand the others, there's still a lot of work to do.
So you're a lot of things. You balance a lot of roles. You're you're Orthodox for sure. You're also very modern in that sort of like French way of thinking of engagement in the world completely as it is. Would you say that you're a Zionist?
Yeah, I fully support the establishment of the State of Israel and the fact that Israel has a right to exist and that Jewish society has the right to exist today in its actual form in Israel. But I think that there is a responsibility of the Israeli government and everyone in power there to fight against their own sometimes to bring an end to the conflict. I'm not saying it's only the Israeli government's fault. Obviously not. Obviously, there are a lot of anti-Semites against Israel who just want to destroy the state of Israel. But I think we should do everything in our power to try to make peace. It comes from a place of love from our fellow Jews, love for this Jewish society that exists. And even though I wouldn't like to live there as a first choice because I like it in France, I think it's a good choice for a lot of people. And I think we need to work together, Israel and the diaspora. I think we should have, as it says, the prophets, the staff of Yosef and the staff of Yehuda to come together for the Mashiach to come. It's in Ezekiel.
Tell me what that means.
The staff of Yosef who's the ambassador who lives in Egypt, who is like the vice president of Egypt, who's the Jew in the non-Jewish society. And Yehuda is usually the more Zionist figure, the one who lives with Jews and who works from the inside. And I think the two types need to work together and we need each other. So if being a Zionist means like we do not need the diaspora, all Jews should be in Israel, then I don't agree with that. But if Zionist means I fully support the establishment of the State of Israel as it is today, creating a Jewish society, then I fully support it. I think that it comes with its own problems and it's not my role to criticize all the time everything. I think it's a very big challenge to be both democratic and a Jewish state. And I think that's part of why I like it in France, where I'm not confronted with this problem.
One of the things that kind of strikes me is, of course, it's very difficult to be a democracy and a Jewish state. It seems very difficult to apply Western values to a country that sits in the Middle East. It might try to espouse Western ideals, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think Israel is in an in-between place, where there's no separation of the synagogue and the state, which is causing some problems because the Israeli rabbinate is very Haredi. Reform and conservative communities are not recognized. And at the same time, it holds a lot of Western values. And, you sometimes feel like you live in two different places when you go from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
And, for sure. I think that's right. Has it been harder to be you since October 7th?
I think everyone can say that, right? Everyone who has values, whether on the right, on the left, whether Orthodox or Reform, everyone feels that it's hard to live in a polarized world today where nuance is not welcome. A few months ago, I lost 2 lifelong friends in the same month. One because I was an anti-Zionist and one because I was a supporter of the genocide in the same month.
So I would assume that you're neither of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that speaks a lot. I think a lot of people want to live in a world where there's black and white, good and evil. Sometimes you should assume your views and be somewhat, on one side or on another. It's not a value to always be in the middle, but trying to be nuanced every time you speak, trying to take into account every point of view can make you feel alone sometimes. And I'm glad that I have a community that's supportive, because even if my friends, do not share my views, whether on the right or the left, it's very important to keep a safe space where you can speak freely and discuss and debate. And that's something that I wish for also in the political space, whether in Israel, in America, or in Europe.
So for me, when I talk about a safe space now, I would say on October 6th, when I talked about a safe space, I meant politically, intellectually, philosophically, religiously. Now I also mean it in terms of my physical safety. And I think it's very interesting to hear from the beginning of the interview, you say that, well, I've always known I'm not safe. My body is in danger. And so it's where do I want it to be in danger most? Here's my last question. Do we need Jews in France, and why?
I think we need Jews everywhere, because on a theological level, what I believe in is that Judaism has a mission to bring something in and bring something out of every nation that exists today. We never fit into the right categories. People who want to have some kind of totalitarian prism through which they're going to look at the world, we just never fit into those categories. So we need to exist everywhere to make people aware that their system is not a done deal. We should reject polarized points of views and always try to be more into the nuance and understanding that the world is a complex place.
It sounds like we are divine agitators. We're here to.
I like this. I actually like this.
Agitate you
this
a little
word.
bit.
I think I'm gonna steal your.
Please.
Your world.
You gave me a few lines to steal. Also, I really appreciate you sitting down with me. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your work.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to What Came After wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us online at whatcameafter.com.
היום אני כבר לא יודעת לאן בדיוק להסתכל, לאן להסתכל. מאיפה להתחיל לספור את מה אני רוצה לגמור. לפעמים נדמה שכל זה קצת גדול עליי, כל זה קצת גדול עליי. היום אני נודדת בעצמי, עוד לא מצאתי בית, עוד לא מצאתי בית. כי לפעמים נדמה שכל זה קצת גדול עליי, כל זה קצת גדול עליי. לפעמים נדמה שכל זה קצת גדול עליי, כל זה קצת גדול עליי. ספרתי יום, פעם ידעתי טעם, ידעתי